Alright guys, tonight I'm going to be showing you my ramp deck. I haven't got as much testing under my belt with this one as I had with Simic Tempo, but you know, I mean, I've only got so much time around the holidays, so rather than just keep doing the same old thing, I'm going to pump out this one, and basically in a somewhat untested state, and we can test it as we go. So I mean, everybody knows that ramp is the big boogeyman in the format, at least from what you can read on online message boards and Reddit and the like. And I'm playing my deck in Naya, and if you can see by the spread there, I'm only playing 7 white cards, 7 white cards, 4 red cards, and 24 green cards. So why is it worth dicking around with a 3-color mana base for only 11 cards? Well, I think that it is, and I'm going to show you. So let's show you the 4 red cards first. Going to play 1 copy of Rolling Thunder because we're going to be ramping and have a ton of mana. So it's a nice, you know, it can be a board wipe at high mana totals if you wanted to. I mean, the main purpose of it in this deck is just to burn somebody out, you know, because if you have 10 mana, this is just 8 to the face. But also, if you have 10 mana, it's a super mega arc lightning that deals 8 damage as you choose, divided amongst all sorts of different stuff. So it's still really good for clearing up a board of Thopters or Elves, or you know, if anybody plays those anymore, even just, you know, weenie aggro creatures if they manage to restabilize and rebuild after your first set of sweepers. And speaking of other sweepers, the other reason to play red is to play Radiant Flames. So we're playing 3 colors, and so we can hit this for the max of X equals 3. So playing a ramp deck, you're always going to be weak to aggro, and so Radiant Flames is one of your ways to just get an early board wipe. In this game, since all the board wipes tend to be rare, so you only get to run 2. So that's why, you know, since we want to have 4, we got to play 2 in 2 different colors. The other one's a white card we'll get to later. And the last red card, and really the reason to play red, is Omnath, Locus of Rage. So it's 7 mana 5/5, but has landfall. And whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token. And whenever he or one of those elementals you control dies, or any elemental, you know, not just one of your tokens. So basically, if he's on board when an elemental you control dies, you get a lightning bolt that you get to point somewhere, creature or player. And he's really, really good. So I mean, that's the main reason to play red, followed by Radiant Flames, and then you're going to put in Rolling Thunder just because you're playing red. So then it's on to white. And the white cards that we are playing, 2 copies of Suppression Bonds. I mean, this stops Planeswalkers and it stops really big creatures from doing their thing. Something like Ulamog, you can put a Suppression Bonds on it, and it won't be able to attack, so it just sits there as a 10/10 and can't attack or block and doesn't do anything. Yeah, he got to exile 2 of your permanents, but then he just sits there. So Suppression Bonds, but it's mainly for Planeswalkers, since we have things like Gideon and Obnixilis in the format now. You can just cast Planeswalkers instead of going through hoops to flip them over. So we're going to play Gideon in this deck because he just makes tokens. He can attack. I mean, he's just this card. If your opponent can't deal with it, then it just wins the game on its own for you. So we're going to play that. But the real reason to play white in this deck is Planar Outbursts. So we're playing red for Radiant Flames. Well, really for Omnath, but also for Radiant Flames. And we're playing white for Planar Outbursts. So we have 4 board wipes in our ramp deck. That lets us, you know, do our early game ramp thing, take a little bit of damage, and then wipe the board with the other guys. So that's why. And also we get access to Angelic Edict. I'm only going to run 1 copy because it's pretty specialized. I mean, it's basically the 3rd Suppression Bonds, but it does exile, which is good for something like Ulamog as well, since he's indestructible, and it can hit enchantments. So it's a very versatile card. It's expensive, so I don't think we need to run more than 1. I guess you know, you could run 2, and it wouldn't be a problem. But you know, once you go above 2, I think you probably run too many. And since we're playing white, we're also going to play Emeria Shepherd. I mean, this is probably, I won't say it's the worst white card, but it's the card I would least like to add a 3rd color for, because I mean, she has a nice landfall trigger. You get your non-land permanents back into your hand, so if they get countered or killed or whatnot, and if you do hit a plains, then it goes straight into the battlefield, you know, which gets underneath counter magic, which is great. But you know, in a 3-color mana base with such a green heavy focus, we're not going to have a whole lot of planes in the deck to begin with, so mostly it's going to go back to your hand. But I think she's still worth it. She's been good for me so far. Generally what I try to do is, once I have my 2 white sources in play, which is all the deck really needs to operate, then whenever I'm filtering with Nissa's Renewal, which we'll talk about in a minute, and Natural Connection, I always just try to filter out the non-planes so that later on in the game I can draw in the planes, you know, if I manage to find her. So that's why I play white and red in your ramp deck, and let's go to the bottom of the list now and just see what I'm playing in green. So I'm playing the standard 4 Gatecreeper Vines because it takes a card out of your deck and fixes your mana. Elvish Visionary, you know, takes a card out of your deck, doesn't fix your mana, but it's still good. You know, you get some value when you cast it. The Evolutionary Leap Engine, because you can sack all of these creatures here You know, they come into play, they have their effect, and then you can just draw into your better threats. I'm going to play Nissa, obviously, because she's still one of the best planeswalkers in the game, and in a deck that's going to get to 7 mana pretty easily. You just cast her, grab a forest, and boom, you got a pretty awesome planeswalker. You know, you get to draw a card, you get to make a 4/4. In this deck, we're pretty much always going to +1, but you could be under some pressure in -2, and then her -7 is a win condition. Not that hard to get to. Playing all 4 Natural Connection, we're playing this instead of Nissa's Pilgrimage, because Pilgrimage only gets basic forests, whereas this, you know, it only gets you 1 card, as opposed to the 2 from Pilgrimage, but it fixes your mana. You can put a mountain into play, or planes, at instant speed, no less. So, you know, with your cards that we mentioned, like Emeria Shepherd, which has landfall, and Omnath, which has landfall, you can actually trigger your landfall at instant speed to, you know, bring something back out of the graveyard if you Natural Connection for a planes, you know, on your opponent's turn, and Emeria Shepherd will get something, and you can also create a 5/5 at instant speed. And you can sack those 5/5s to Evolutionary Leap if you want a Searing, or I'm sorry, I was going to say Searing Spear, but Lightning Bolt is much sexier. If you want to Lightning Bolt something, and if you get enough Elementals on the field, you can just cast Planar Outburst and point all the damage to your opponent's face, which is kind of fun. I've done that before. So yeah, you know, Natural Connection fixes your mana, triggers landfall at instant speed, and if someone tries to moss you, you can respond with a Natural Connection. If they try to blow up a red source, then you just connection for a red source. So you can fix your mana that way, and I really like the instant speed, obviously, for the landfall. Going to play Woodland Wanderer. We can't hit this guy to the max. I mean, I could throw in a couple of off-color of new battle lands, but I don't want to, since the mana base is already kind of clunky enough as it is, and has enough non-basics. And all of our fetching goes to basic lands. Natural Connection only gets basic lands, and this is Renewal, which we'll talk about in a little while, like I said, only gets basic lands. So, whoops, that's From Beyond. So Woodland Wanderer, in this deck, he's always going to be a 5/5 Vigilant Trampler for 4 mana. He's never going to get to 6/6, but I think that's still a pretty good fucking creature, a 5/5 Vigilant Trampler for 4. And he's also an Elemental, so that if you have him in play with Omnath and he dies, you will get the trigger. But he's just an extremely valuable creature, so I mean, against an aggro deck, if you don't draw your Radiant Flames, and you need to live 1 more turn, then Woodland Wanderer can stand in the way to almost anything. He's a good attacker against a slower, dirtily deck. He does a lot of damage. They have to deal with it, and that's less removal they're going to have for your threats later on in the game. So Woodland Wanderer is obviously he's just insane. I think he's one of the best things you can be doing in this game at 4 mana. If you can get, you know, if you can say to your, you know, if you're getting a 4/4 Vigilant Trample in the right deck, that's fine. Like if you're an aggressive, you know, deck, like in my Simic Tempo. I don't mind casting this guy as just, you know, with blue-green 4/4 Vigilant Trample, because I'm putting pressure on with Snapping Gnarlids and Bounding Crassus and all that sort of stuff. So I'm pressuring their life enough as it is, and since you're the beatdown, you don't mind the 4/4. But that deck can also make this a 6/6. But this deck will always make it a 5/5 when you can cast it. So it's just so good. And then we're going to play From Beyond. You know, it generates tokens, which speeds you up on mana, which is, you know, one of the things that this deck wants to do, since we're playing a ramp deck. So it also generates tokens that you can sacrifice to Evolutionary Leap to dig through your deck. And the most important thing that it does, though, is that last ability where you can sacrifice it and search your library for an Eldrazi card. We're only playing 2, which is Oblivion Sower, whoops, and Ulamog. But this guy here is the big reason to run 2 copies of From Beyond in your deck. He's one of the most powerful cards in the game. We'll get to him shortly. And From Beyond basically guarantees that, you know, you get to run 3 copies without ever drawing any more than 1, and it helps in the early game. Well, I won't say the early game, since you're casting on turn 4 all the time. We don't have any 2 mana ramp to skip to 4 mana on turn 3. But you know, you're getting those tokens to speed you up on mana. You know, if you cast this on 4, hit your land drop on 5, you can, this is Renewal, jump up to 8, untap, play a land for 9. You know, and you'll have a token actually to let you have 10 mana on your 6th turn. So I mean, it's just awesome all around. We'll go back to Gideon for 1 second. Since I mentioned From Beyond's token producing and the synergy with Evo Leap, Gideon has the same thing. You make a 2/2 white knight ally creature token for 0 mana, and then you sacrifice it if you want to Evolutionary Leap and draw a creature card, which is just insane. I mean, you know, for 1 green mana, you just draw any creature card out of your deck, and eventually you thin them all out and you find all the best ones. So, playing around. Oh, we talked about the white cards, so I'm gonna skip those. Green Warden of Marasa. I mean, the second ability is bugged, so when it dies, you know, you can't exile it and get another card back from your graveyard. So, you know, it's just a really, really expensive Eternal Witness with a bigger body. But, you know, we don't mind in this deck actually not using the Exile clause, because with Emeria Shepherd we can actually just play Plains, bring the Green Warden back onto the field, and then pick up any card. So I mean, Emeria Shepherd can't get cards like Angelic Edict back. So if you have a Green Warden in the yard and an Emeria Shepherd in play, you play Plains, you put your Green Warden into play, and you pick up your Edict. So you can recycle, you know, or you can pick up your renewal. So you can use Emeria Shepherd to get back your spells if you manage to have Green Warden. I mean, they're both one-offs. It's going to be a rare scenario, but it could come up. And I mean, Green Warden is just a good card. You know, if you lose something important, you play a Gideon, your opponent kills it. You know, they probably went out of their way to deal with it, and then you Green Warden, get it back, and you still get a 5/4 in play, and you get to repressure with Gideon. So, and Oblivion Sower is just it's just insane. I mean, you get to exile the top 4 cards of your opponent's library, so that's going to trigger landfall. It's going to ramp you up, and it's a 5/8 for 6 mana. That's just going to protect you. Or, you know, if your opponent's not doing anything, it's going to kill them. So it's just an insane card, and I think that pretty much every ramp deck should be running it. You know, it's really, really good. This is Renewal. I'm not playing any Jaddy offshoots in this deck. I don't think they're good enough, honestly, and I don't think there's enough aggro running around to devote more than you know, too many slots to combating it. I mean, I do have the 2 Radiant Flames and the 2 Planar Outbursts plus the Woodland Wanderer on 4, so I got enough cards that I can kind of stonewall them. I mean, I can chump block with Visionaries and Gate Creepers if they're putting on a lot of pressure. And this is Renewal. It just gains us 7 life and strips 3 lands out of our deck and races us to 10 mana, where we can cast some of the best stuff in the game. If you have an Emeria Shepherd on board, it's just ridiculous, you know, because you get 3 landfall triggers for her. If you have an Omnath on the board, it's ridiculous because you get 3 triggers for him. But it's mostly about the 7 life and stripping 3 out. It's mostly what it's about. If you get to combo it with some landfall in it, it's just gravy. So Emeria Shepherd we talked about. Guy's Revenge, I'm only going to run 1 of these. It's a hedge against blue-based control, you know, with counterspells, since they're actually a thing these days. And so I mean, I don't think you need to run 2. You know, I mean, there's just, this deck is, you know, it's got a whole lot of 1-ofs on the upper end with the fat. A lot of it is because the creatures are mythic rare, but it's kind of just like a, you know, you present a bunch of different threats to your opponent. You know, Emeria Shepherd, her ability, I mean, I'm sorry, Guy's Revenge, his ability only works while he's on the battlefield. So if he's in your graveyard, you can play a Plains and get your haste at 8/5. If you don't have a Plains, well, I mean, you can just put it back in your hand and then cast it. It'll still have haste either way and be uncounterable. So, I mean, Guy's Revenge is just stupid, but like I said, I don't think you need to. Not in this deck. There's so much more toolboxiness. There's a whole bunch of 1s and 2s, but it just works because of this bad boy right here. You know, if you can find your Evo Leap, you eventually find all the creatures in your deck and just overwhelm them with threats. And Emeria Shepherd, once they've answered everything, she just brings everything back for another go. Yeah, Omnath is just insane. We talked about him. That's just crazy. And Ulamog, obviously, you get to exile 2 different things. If you're in a mirror match and you suspect your opponent has an Ulamog, probably best not to cast yours. And just wait. You know, he's going to throw his out at you, and then your Ulamog can exile his. That's the thing in these Ulamog mirrors. You don't want to be the first one to cast yours. So if you're ahead on board, and you know you have some stuff going on that's good, then you know, if you suspect an Ulamog from your opponent, or if you know he tutors one up, don't show him yours. You know, unless he already knows you have it, I guess. If you tutored up, you know yours from beyond. But yeah, but you know, if you have an Angelic Edict in hand, maybe you play yours, exile that, plus another thing. He exiles yours, and then you exile his, and you're ahead on board. Who knows? You know, obviously the board is going to dictate what's going to happen. As far as the mana base goes, I'm not playing any Evolving Wilds, and I'm only playing 24 land. The reason to play only 24 is you're playing 4 Gate Creepers and 4 Natural Connections, so you have a lot of ways to filter land out of your deck and get you up to the mana totals, and then you can just play this as Renewal. So 24 has been just fine. I'm playing all 3 sets of check lands and both sets of battle lands that you can have in your wedge mana. So that's 10 dual lands. That leaves me only space for 14 basics. You know, and this is Renewal takes out 3. Connection takes, and I've got 2 of those, so that's 6. Connection takes out 4. And Group of Vine takes out 4. So that's 14. You know, so you'll never actually get to cast all these spells and have enough lands left in your deck. If you play fetch lands, and you know, I wish we had the real fetch lands, but if you play, you know, Evolving Wilds, you're gonna, first of all, if I play 4 Evolving Wilds, let's just take it to the max, then I'm only playing 10 basics, and those Evolving Wilds take even more basics out of the deck, which basically means that my Renewals and Connections are going to whiff completely later on in the game, and I don't want that to happen because I do have the landfall triggers with the Emeria Shepherd and Omnath, so I really just, I don't mind you know, I don't think the deck really needs the thinning aspect of the Evolving Wild, since we do have so much fetch to get it out of there. So I'm fine with playing it this way. One thing I will say is if you do have 2 white sources, like I said, when you're fetching out your mana, try to get that mountain. I've only got 1 in here because we've only got the 2 double red spells. Radiant Flames is only single red, so we can fix that with a Gate Creeper or a Natural Connection. So we do have the other 6 dual red sources that we just have to draw 1 of them and we're golden. White, I'm playing 6 plains for a Miri Shepherd, rather than play too many mountains that we don't really need, since we've only got 4 red cards. And like I said early on in the game, just strip your forests out of the deck, because that'll give you a ton of mana to sink into Evo Leap, and then later on in the game you can just fetch out your plains, or you'll draw into them naturally when you finally have found that Emiria Shepherd. So anyway, that's the deck. I've had a limited amount of testing with it. I've played multiple versions of it. I've been through Acid Moss. I've been, I didn't have Evolutionary Leap in here, and I've tried different things. But this one, I've probably played 3 or 4 games, but this version feels good. And we'll see how it goes. So yeah, that's Naya Ramp. The curve looks pretty decent for a ramp deck. And like I said, 24 land has been satisfactory, since we do have the 4 creepers and the 4 connections, plus Nissa's renewal at the top. So we do have 10 cards to take lands out of our deck. And we have Evolutionary Leap to sift out the creatures. Actually, we also have Nissa, so I can discount it. We can actually fetch out 15 basics from this deck, and we only have 14, plus we're going to draw some naturally. So anyways, yeah, that is Naya Ramp. At least that's my take on it so far. We'll take it out into the lobbies to see how it does. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in a few minutes.